It is indeed heartening to see the global festival of oneness being celebrated worldwide in this manner. This is a special month since Advaita Academy is celebrating the birth anniversary of Adi Shankaracharya. Many scholars have presented their thoughts so far in this festival, and now I will be presenting one more discussion in this same regard. The topic of this discussion is Adi Shankaracharya's philosophy. Shankaracharya was a Santa, an Acharya, and also a Rishi. These three words in Sanskrit have a specific meaning. The word Rishi is defined as Rishyate Anena iti Rishihi, meaning he is a Rishi from whom all people derive joy and satisfaction. The word Acharya is defined as Acharati, Acharayati iti Acharya, meaning he puts into practice the teachings of scriptures himself, and he also enables others to abide by those teachings. Such a person is called an Acharya. The word Santa is used to indicate those who seek the Sat Tattva, study the Sat, and lead others on the path of Sat. Such people are called Santa. So Shankaracharya was a Santa, an Acharya, and also a Rishi. In our childhood, we used to often hear about 8 wonders of the world. Perhaps there are more additions to this list even now. But it is a great wonder in itself why Shankaracharya's name is not included in the list of these global wonders. This may be because we have not yet developed the vision to look up to a person as a wonder. Shankaracharya's biography is truly an astonishing treat for one and all. Shankara was regarded as an extremely brilliant scholar in his lifetime. The sheer brilliance of his intellect may not be known or acknowledged by those who have no spiritual inclination or no insight into Vedanta. But people who have studied even a little bit of Vedanta will concede to the fact that Shankara indeed had a razor-sharp intellect. Unanimously regarded as a child prodigy, he was especially known for his extraordinary memory. It is said that he never needed to be taught anything twice by his teachers. The beauty of Shankaracharya's persona lies in the fact that he was a Tattvajna, a Vedanti, a Bhakta, and also a yogi. It is indeed rare to see all these 4 facets converged in one place. The devotion of all devotees is usually rooted in deep love. Devotees are known for their sensitive and tender heart, so they may not develop a liking for the Vedantic scriptures. However, devotion, yoga, philosophy, and knowledge, all these 4 aspects were living together happily in the remarkable persona of Shankaracharya. No wonder why his biography is captivating for us even today. His extensive travel across India is noteworthy in its own right. Back in the days, there were no proper roads, no luxury vehicles, and hardly any safety for any traveler. Our nation was divided into many kingdoms, and each state was defined by its own boundaries. It is difficult for us today to surmise even vaguely about travel challenges in those days. Today, if a person visits Badrinath even by a flight, he feels exhausted by that journey. In contrast, traveling to Badrinath in the 8th century and establishing a mutt in that remote place was a daunting task. However, Shankaracharya traveled across the length and breadth of the country. He established 4 principal mutts: Badrinath, Dwarka, Puri, and Sringeri, in 4 different directions of India. Indeed, how did he manage to travel in those trying conditions? Who accompanied him? What helped him sustain through this journey? We cannot help but marvel at these stories. They help us debunk the myth that spiritual people are meek or feeble. Shankaracharya was a sannyasin, but based on his rigorous travel, we can surely infer that he was a strong and resilient person. We all know that he lived for 32 years. But he has done an astounding amount of work in such a short lifespan. Today we see that people barely are on their feet at the age of 32. Students spend most of their early years in education and internship. Then they start working professionally. Shankara, on the other hand, did monumental work in 32 years. Later, it is believed that he disappeared and ended his life in a cave in Kedarnath. He is best known as the founder of Kevaladvaita Tattvajnan. Kevaladvaita is based on the theory of Maya. But Shankaracharya by no means is Mayavadi. He has built the doctrine of Maya for mere understanding of all seekers. The world around us is full of many differences. There is diversification all around us. How then can we reconcile this dualistic world with non-dual Brahman? Therefore, Shankara propounded the theory of Maya only for explaining this varied appearance of the world. Also, we should note that word Maya has been mentioned earlier in the Upanishads in 2 or 3 places. Shankaracharya did the crucial job of building the entire Tattvajnan based on Maya. He did not create, invent or produce Maya out of his own personal belief. Thus, Shankaracharya is not a Mayavadi. He is rather a Maya Nirasavadi. Samartha Ramdas Swami, a famous saint from Maharashtra, has said, first we can use Maya as a system to recognize that the visible world is an illusion, that is Maya. And later, we can refute the Mayic world to realize oneness with the ultimate reality Brahma. This indeed is the main purpose of Mayavad, which is propounded in Kevaladvaita philosophy. Shankaracharya, as we all know, is most reputed for his commentary on the Prasthanatrayi. He has also composed numerous other Prakarana Grantha and Stotras. However, his commentary on the Prasthanatrayi is the most significant among all of his works. Let us now reflect on how his works are immensely useful and applicable in all aspects of our day-to-day life. Human life is broadly divided into 3 aspects: karma, upasana and jnana. This division may not have been evident or clear in the primitive stages of human development. But let us briefly reflect on how karma, upasana and jnana were associated with human life by going back to history. Karma has been associated with humans ever since the human race came into existence. The word karma mainly means any physical, mental or verbal action. In early days, karma meant basic reactions like using bow and arrow, killing animals, cooking food, protecting people, etc. It has always been imperative for humans to engage in some action. The concept of upasana was born out of fear in ancient days. Even today, we can see that many people worship God out of fear. For example, in present times, we see that many people are truly scared and worried about the COVID-19 situation. Many people have started chanting Ramaraksha Stotra to protect themselves from the corona outbreak. This is nothing but upasana based on fear. Back in the days, humans realized that they were helpless in natural calamities. They had no control over such situations. They wished for a higher authority who could protect them through these calamities. Many upasanas were born out of this desire for protection in old days. Even today, in a place like Murgud where I stay, there are examples of laborers who live and travel in groups. These laborers usually host a flag in the center of their huts. They worship the flag before they go to work. There is no explanation of what that flag is and why to worship it. But laborers continue to worship it for a reason unknown even to them. This basically indicates that upasana is necessary for humans even today. Jnana is usually born out of curiosity. Vedanta draws our attention to two questions. Koham, Kathamidam Jataha. These are the most fundamental questions faced by the inquisitive human mind. Perhaps the primitive humans did not think about them since their entire life was merely centered on sustenance of the body. Only when humans were somewhat settled in their day-to-day lives, they could think about these issues. The entire Vedanta Shastra has been created to answer two questions. Who am I? How is this world created? Many acharyas have attempted to address these questions in their own ways. However, Shankaracharya's Kevaladvaita is the most renowned among all schools of thought. It has systematically answered all primal questions on life. Many people across the world have taken to the study Kevaladvaita today. It continues to be popular among seekers and scholars alike. Thus, we have seen that karma, upasana, jnana, these three aspects are naturally integrated in human life. Shankara is best known as a staunch Vedantin. Most of his works are centered around jnana. But it is interesting to note that he has also given excellent guidelines on karma, upasana and yoga in his work. It may not be possible for us to consider all of them in this short talk, but let us try to get just a brief flavor of these extensive teachings across all the four areas: karma, upasana, yoga and jnana. First, we will reflect on Shankaracharya's guidance on karma. Karma is an integral part of human life. How can we best execute this karma so that we can find happiness and peace in this life? Acharya has given due consideration to this aspect. In his text Sadhana Panchakam, he says, Vedo Nityam Adhiyatam. One should study the Vedas on a regular basis. We may wonder, what is the use of the Vedic study in today's age? The reason Vedic study is important is that Vedas have mentioned Vidhi and Nishedh, that is, do's and don'ts. If we are indeed able to follow these guidelines and execute karma accordingly, then there are two benefits. First is that we can remain at peace internally in mind. And second, there is usually no regret associated with any action such as I should have done this or I should not have done this or not sure why I acted like that. If we follow the scriptures while doing actions, the mind can remain at peace without any regret. This can help maintain harmony on a familial level. If every person in a family performs his duty as guided by scriptures, then there will be no reason for any discord among family members. Every person will know that others are doing their duties as guided by the Shastra and not as a matter of personal whim or preference. Today, however, most people are free to act as per their own will. As a result, we can see many conflicts on familial and social level. These conflicts are rooted in the fact that somewhere we have shown disregard for the do's and don'ts prescribed by the Vedas. Human life based on conflict cannot be filled with peace and harmony. People who live contentious lives cannot pursue any higher goal. In ancient days, people could take up and pursue one goal persistently in their lives. They had favorable familial and social structure to support them through their pursuit. This support structure is largely seen missing today. Most people are seen blindly chasing wealth, power, success, fame, and prestige in society. They take pride in such lifestyle. They also receive recognition from society for their worldly pursuits. This is the stark reality of today's age, whether we like it or not. However, Acharya has presented the picture of ideal human life in front of us through his writings. As per his guidance, if we can indeed embrace the do's and don'ts prescribed in the Vedas, conflicts will be minimized on all three levels, that is, personal, familial, and social level. Human life will be harmonious in a true sense. For executing karma, Shankara next states, Tat uditam karma swanushtiyatam. He says that we should do anushtan of the karma which is prescribed by the Vedas. The word anushtan indicates two things. Number one, consistency, and number two, purity. If every karma is executed as anushtan, we will be able to do it consistently with the pure and pious mind. This will help us find peace in life. When a person leads a highly individualistic life, there is little consideration for familial and social peace in his approach. Such a self-oriented life leads to conflict and unrest on all levels, since every person tends to think only about himself. We say that we are living in an age of competition, but such competition in fact leads to more distress than true lasting happiness. Through all his guidelines on karma, Shankara says that we should consciously try to attain harmony everywhere in our lives. Next, it is Dhanyashtakam Stotra. He says that we should learn to see that someone else is the ultimate doer of all actions. We are conditioned to wrongly believe that I am the doer, or this action was done because of me, or this would not have happened if I were not there. These thoughts are truly troublesome for every seeker. They are destructive from spiritual perspective. The seeker is supposed to let go of the feeling of doership completely. He should offer the fruits of all actions done by him to Ishvara. Shankara says that a seeker who can thus perform his karma is blessed, dhanya, in a true sense. In the section of karma, Shankara also gives very practical tips to amend our day-to-day life. He says, Chud Vyadishyam Chikitsatyam. In this verse, he has equated hunger to a disease. To cure this disease, Shankara says that we should consume only as much food as is necessary to appease the hunger. Also, the food should be sattvic in nature. It is a well-known fact that food influences our mental and intellectual makeup. It is thus necessary for us to avoid the food that is Rajasa and Tamasa and also stop overeating. If we can truly abide by this teaching, then our mind and intellect can become sattvic in nature. Where there is the sattvikta, we can clearly see that there is peace and satisfaction. Achieving such harmony should ideally be a goal of human life. Today, it may not be a goal for most people in the society to live a peaceful life. And the main reason is that we as society have disregarded the study of Vedas, the Upanishads, and other spiritual texts. Nevertheless, this social, familial, and individual harmony has a significant place in our traditions. And Shankara draws our attention to this same fact time and again. Thus, we have seen that Shankaracharya has given many valuable guidelines on karma in his writings. Now we will reflect on Shankara's guidance on Upasana. The first major contribution of Shankaracharya in this regard is his commentary on the Vishnu Sahasranam. In this popular hymn, he has explained each name of Vishnu in the light of Advaita. For example, Ameya is a name of Vishnu. Ameya is also a word which is used to describe Atma. Ameya means immeasurable, and Shankara has made a beautiful confluence of Saguna and Nirguna through his commentary on the Vishnu Sahasranam. Many devotees feel perplexed about Saguna and Nirguna forms of God. They are unable to perform the Upasana ideally as prescribed by the scriptures. Acharya has removed this confusion through his commentary on Vishnu Sahasranam. He has made Upasana and Bhakti clear for all devotees by composing many stotras. In his Hari Mide Stotra, he says that God is Bhavagrahyam Bhaktairlabhyam. It means that the real God can only be realized through Bhakti and Bhava. This indeed is a beautiful thought. Bhakti is invariably based on Bhav. The word Bhav means existence and Abhav means non-existence. Shankara says that devotees should have a firm belief in the existence of God. He assures us that God can be certainly realized through such firm belief and devotion. At the end of Annapurna Stotram, Shankara requests the goddess in this manner: O Devi Parvati, please grant me alms for the sake of securing Jnana and Vairagya. We, as devotees, often ask mostly for worldly things from God in our prayers. Shankara, however, teaches us what should be asked for of God in our worship. Spiritual knowledge and dispassion go hand in hand. Even Upasana is based in dispassion. It is not the case that only a jnani or sannyasi is dispassionate by nature. Even a devotee can be dispassionate about worldly affairs while worshipping the Lord. The only difference is that Vairagya is manifested in a different ways in a jnani and in a bhakta. We can define the word Vairagya in simple terms as an art of being present among one and all, but being internally not being attached to anything at the same time. There is a popular misconception that Virakta or dispassionate people have an I don't care attitude. They react in a dry, caustic and insensitive manner to others. However, the true devotee is not even remotely insensitive, even though he is dispassionate by nature. This is because the devotee sees only one God manifested everywhere in all forms. When a devotee behaves in a dry, insensitive manner with others, it disturbs his personal as well as family life. Being insensitive is not a characteristic of a bhakta or even a sannyasi. At the same time, being attached to worldly affairs is not a sign of a virakta. So the true devotee is the one who can attain the golden mean, where he interacts lovingly with one and all, but at the same time internally he is not attached to anyone. Such a devotee also does deliberately show off his dispassion. Such a devotee also does not deliberately show off his dispassion. In fact, he ensures that people around him do not even notice his inner dispassion. His dispassion, if revealed openly, may alienate him from others. It may eventually disturb the harmony in his own life and the lives of others around him. Ultimately, upasana or any other spiritual practice is meant only so that a person, his family, and entire society may live happily and peacefully. Spiritual philosophy is not meant to be studied in isolation. Scriptures are created so that they are totally in adherence to our day-to-day life. Sadhana and moksha. We can see that most of our enlightened saints have never abandoned society. They did not turn their back on the norms of day-to-day life. Santa Jnaneshwar, the famous Santa from Maharashtra, led a life where he was subjected to immense torture from many elements of the society. Despite that, he continued to write his magnificent commentary on the Gita in Marathi. He did not express even a single note of disapproval, grief, or revenge in his treatise. This is a great example of being virakta, which shows that Jnaneshwar Maharaj had mastered the art of being present among one and all, but internally not being attached to anyone at the same time. We too can follow his footsteps for leading a peaceful life. In his Sri Ram Stotra, Shankara says, Tvadanyam na manye na manye na manye. Here he describes the importance of unswerving devotion, that is ananyata. It means that the devotee is supposed to keep his firm faith exclusively in one Lord, Lord Rama. This is an important aspect of upasana, where the devotee adheres to only one God through his spiritual practice. Acharya mentions another guideline for upasana in his Shivananda Lahari Stotra. He says, Chetaha Sarva Bhayapaham Vraja. This means, to get rid of fear in the mind, the devotee should worship and surrender unconditionally to the feet of Lord Shankara. The name Shankara means Shankaroti iti Shankara. That is, the Lord who leads the devotee to his welfare is Shankara. It is necessary to note here that surrender to God should be unconditional. It means whatever Lord Shankara grants to a devotee, whether good or bad, the devotee is supposed to take it as God's grace. Only then his fear can be truly eliminated from his mind. It may be difficult to worship God in this manner. However, the true devotee is supposed to unconditionally surrender to the feet of his Lord. This simply means the devotee is first supposed to execute his karma in the best possible manner, and then he should learn to see the results as the grace of God. This balance is important in devotion. The devotee should own all his actions completely, while he should see the results as the grace of God. Such surrender will ensure that he will have no conflict, fear, or bitterness in his mind for any action or any result. The very purpose of upasana is that the devotee should not develop bitterness in his mind for any reason. Such bitterness removes peace and harmony completely from life. Many people learn to live with such restlessness as an unavoidable part of their routine. This is certainly not the ideal way to lead human life. There is a famous sukta in Atharva Veda which says, Jivet Sharadaha Shatam Nandeta Sharadaha Shatam. This sukta states that we should live for 100 years and lead our lives filled with happiness. Shankaracharya has provided many guidelines through which seekers can perform karma and upasana in such a way which will lead them towards blissful and peaceful life. So far we have seen Shankara's guidance on karma and upasana. Now thirdly, we will see that he has also provided guidelines for yoga. In fact, Shankara was believed to be a great yogi himself. There are stories about some chamatkaras that he did when he was traveling. People may or may not believe in miracles today, but there is a popular tale about his debate with Mandan Mishra, who was known to be a staunch karmat in his times. On one such occasion, Mandanji was performing a Shraddha Vidhi. He had closed the doors and windows of his residence completely, so he could avoid seeing any guests during his ritual. It is said that Shankara entered the residence of Mandan Mishra secretly through Akash Marga. He directly came and stood at the place where the ritual was being performed. Mandan Mishra asked furiously, Kuto Mundi, which actually means, O Sannyasin, where did you come from? Shankara gave a spin to his question and answered differently. Agalata Mundi, which means, I had done my mundan from neck upwards. This dialogue between the two luminaries is quite enchanting. It is a treat for all Vedanta lovers. There are more such stories which indicate that Shankara was a great yogi. He had attained Ashta Mahasiddhi, through which he could do such chamatkars. In his text Yoga Taravali, he has provided extensive guidance for all traditional yogic practices, but they are difficult to abide by most ordinary seekers. Hence, Acharya has presented them in the light of Advaita Vedanta in his text Aparoksha Anubhuti and Sadacharanusandanam. That is, let us consider three aspects which Acharya has defined differently in his writings: asana, dhyana and pranayama. There are many difficult asanas mentioned in traditional Ashtanga Yoga. But Shankaracharya states that the posture in which we can sit easily for some time and contemplate on the fact that I am Atman is the right asana. He does not insist on any difficult posture like Padmasana or Vajrasana here. He rather states that any posture which we are able to contemplate on Atman without straining the body is called asana. Acharya defines dhyana as maunam swadhyayanam dhyanam. He says, silently studying for the self-realization of Atman is called dhyana. He does not ask us to concentrate on a frame, an idol or a flame, etc., which is required in traditional dhyana. He rather puts emphasis on inner silence and the study of the true self in this method of dhyana. For pranayama, Acharya defines Rechak as exhaling out worldly thoughts and Purak as inhaling the thought that I am Brahman. He does not ask us to control our breath in this process. His pranayama is based on controlling mental thoughts. It is not related to physical breath control, which can be difficult for many people. These definitions indicate that Acharya has indeed made it possible for ordinary worldly seekers to execute the arduous yogic practices in a new manner in his texts. Thus we have seen that Acharya has provided guidance on karma, upasana and yoga. And lastly, we will see a brief flavor of his guidance on the jnana. In his famous Dvadasha Panjarika Stotra, Acharya asks a question, Kate Kantaha Kaste Putraha. It may seem that he is trying to alienate us from our close ones here in this line. However, he encourages us to think on the most primal questions of human life. Who is my wife? Is my son really mine? And who am I? Indeed, every conscientious person is supposed to reflect on these questions in his lifetime. Self-realization is the very purpose of human life. Upanishads have stated a law of life that Atmanastu Kami Sarvam Priyam Bhavati. This means I like or love other people only so long as they are good or favorable to me. The moment they become adverse for me, I start disliking them. This basically means we only love others out of our selfish interests. It is difficult for us to accept this fact. However, it's a stark reality of human life. Reality is never harsh. It is merely a reality. That is, the fact that the sun is hot is a reality. It is neither good or not bad. We should just accept it as it is. Similarly, we should wholeheartedly accept the fact that love we feel for our close ones is purely based on selfish interests. These facts should be assimilated only internally in mind without flaunting them explicitly to others. They create the strong foundation of vairagya, which is necessary for spiritual pursuits. Vairagya, which is born out of such careful discretion, is not noisy. It is rather a peaceful inner state of mind. Shankara impels us to think about some profound questions of life in this manner. Lastly, we will reflect on the most famous principle of Vedanta, which Acharya has skillfully mentioned in only half a verse. He says, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Jivo Brahmaya Naparaha. This means Brahman alone is real and the world is unreal. This fact should be considered the foundation of our day-to-day life. Some people think that the very thought of Jagan Mithyatva is an escapist approach. This means for those who want to evade responsibilities. This is certainly not true. It is necessary to understand the real spirit of term Mithyatva. The word Mithya indicates those things which are in constant state of flux. Mithya also means whatever begins is subject to an end. And whatever arrives is bound to leave one day. There is no bitterness, hopelessness, negativity or escapism associated with this thought that the world is mithya. In fact, it is a truly positive and realistic thought. One of the characteristics of mithyatva is pratiti matra sattavan. It means an object exists only when it is seen or perceived. However, when we do not see it, it has no existence at all. This thought truly helps us think that a person only exists so long as we have his pratiti. It helps us deal with all people in a responsible manner while they are present in our lives and while we interact with them. Mithyatva indicates that there is no need to worry about people or think about them once we are part of them. We are part from them. Once we part from them, they do not exist for us when we do not have their pratiti in our lives. The concept of mithyatva can best be used by old age parents today. For many parents, their children stay away from them in different states or countries. Most of them tend to worry about the well-being of their children who stay far away. Instead of worrying or wailing in such cases, the parents can perceive their children as pratiti matra sattavan. This means that children exist only so long as we interact with them. We should treat them with genuine love and attention when we are together. However, at all other times, we can stop worrying or thinking about them. As per the rule of Mithyatva, children do not exist when we don't have their pratiti in our lives. Lamenting about past and worrying about the future are the two biggest issues that trouble the human mind. However, if we can truly assimilate the thought of Mithyatva as propounded by Shankara, it will help us remove all those troublesome thoughts from the mind. Despite being a monk, a sannyasi in himself, Adi Shankaracharya's works provide excellent guidance for seekers from all walks of life. His guidance on karma, upasana, yoga and jnana is a very vast and profound at the same time. If we can truly embrace all his teachings, we will be able to find true harmony, peace and bliss in life. Peaceful and blissful human life is glorious and sublime in a true sense. Let us all pray that by the grace of Adi Shankaracharya, may we all live a life of eternal glory and absolute bliss.